In the face of Russian war in Ukraine, global technology businesses are trying to understand how to act. There are many different, at least two ways how to act. Some are opening their services for Russian citizens that are in big need of objective information from the West. When you know everybody in the government is closing down on Facebook and other social media, very trusted sources of information for Russian citizens. VPN companies are opening their services, discounting a lot of their services for Russian citizens, at least starting to do so. Another example, such prominent figures like Elon Musk opening Starlink and their services for Ukrainian and citizens who are in big need of internet, that this is destroyed by war in Ukraine. There is another path for companies, like other companies are closing down services for Russian market. We will have an interview later in this program with CEO of Omnisend, one of the largest European newsletter platforms for businesses and private people in Europe. He has a different opinion. He says, we are closing down our services for Russian market and for Belarusian market. The interesting example today would be the call to action by Tom Okman, CEO of one of the largest global cybersecurity conglomerate, TESONET, that is based in Lithuania. He writes in his post on LinkedIn, we do think about the sanctions from the offline world, banning banks, SWIFT, trusts, but why we don't do it online? It would be hurting much more. Imagine if DigiCert, GeoTrust, Let's Encrypt, Cloudflare would revoke certificates for all top Russian banks and fake news media outlets, government websites and SQL servers. Browsers would stop trusting them, apps wouldn't work, chaos would start within the country, and it is not that easily solvable. You don't have a centralized provisioning system for root certificates for the country, writes Thomas Okman in his recent LinkedIn post calling to action and having many reactions, several thousands positive reactions from his LinkedIn profile. But the key question here is how technology businesses should react to fast-changing situation in such troubling times. Do they have to act proactively regarding imposing different bans on their services, especially on infrastructure services, or should they leave that initiative for Western community governments to decide how to fight the Russian government? Now we are talking only about infrastructural components of cyber world, where there are a lot of services that are provided by businesses that can do the difference. So today in the studio I have my good colleague, my good pal, Arūnas Vismantas, who is a very much specialist on cyber security and tech trends in the world. And I ask the same question, Arūnas. How businesses should react, how tech communities should react regarding infrastructural solutions, banning the availability of infrastructure for Russian and Belarusian regimes.
So the real question should not be can Microsoft or any big tech companies, can do something. Of course, the answer, honest answer, I think they can do a lot. But the real question is that should they do anything? And this is where I think it's a hugely, first of all, it's a very difficult situation for any big companies now. So big tech, so we're talking about Meta, ex-Facebook, we're talking about Twitter, we're talking about all social media platforms, first of all, right? Then we're talking about companies like Apple, companies, search engines like Google, etc. Yeah, so big tech is currently actually on a lot of pressure as well from the world, where Ukrainian government defense minister actually personally reached out to the CEOs and asked for them to take action and to participate in this, and very quickly, like Elon Musk, he's responded, and Starlink is sending all these Wi-Fi routers to provide the internet, free internet for
Ukrainians.
Yeah, for Ukrainians in the disturbance, which is, you know, like securing an infrastructure is obviously one of the key points in here.
It's the basic stuff. It's bottom line, yes?
Yeah, so these are, you know, these are already a massive wins. But the really further question goes, you know, does the private sector should be involved deeper? And if yes, then how deep? Or, you know, what kind of role should they be playing? Like, we just came out of pandemic, which was, you know, this was the first time, I think, in history where private sector or private companies were actually solving global problems, you know, by producing vaccines and etc., obviously with government support. And now we're going into another crisis just literally after that, barely recovered from the first, where now suddenly the same companies, you know, they already have like a problem because a lot of them were doing business probably in Russia, doing business in Ukraine, they're losing all of that business suddenly. And on top of that, you know, they have to, you know, impose some sort of sanctions and things like that. So I think there's two sides to it. I think that, you know, if you look in from the perspective, from geopolitical perspective, right? So politics side, you know, Switzerland has stepped out from being neutral, and now we have companies.
It's unprecedented
exactly,
regarding Switzerland.
So, you know, so Switzerland has decided to take a side, and I think a lot of companies are also doing, and they're also afraid, you know, like when we talk about big tech companies, they have a big problem because one thing is that they have to secure their share price, and we're seeing what's happening. You know, the market is really emotional. That everybody's really emotional, and I think everybody relates to that. You know, there's a massive catastrophe that's happening, but now, so these companies, they don't want to. I think they're in a tough spot because if they're not going to side with the, you know, with the Western world, they might be, you know, punished. I think you know, Netflix had like some sort of a situation where they were like striking a deal with Russian government and suddenly, you know, quickly changed because I think it was really related first of all to the financial bottom line because they realized what kind of a problems they can get into, and secondly, obviously, you know, moral sides of it, or you know, vice versa. But the real thing is that I think, you know, is that that's a big tech. So the big tech has a different, separately, I think, different, you know, position. They have different problems to solve. They have much bigger impact that they can do.
But Meta, for example, already announced yesterday, I think, that they will be banning and being very aggressive in their field, because before talking about Facebook and the United States elections and all this fraud information, fake information, they were doing nothing. And now they are taking action already quite aggressively.
Yes, I think Meta has, or Facebook, you know, as we know it, like has an exceptionally like difficult situation. I guess, you know, in one way you can say that, well, I don't know how much Facebook is not dominant player in the Russian market. I think Instagram is more of a player in the Russian market because they have their own Kontakte, like, so it's kind of similar to Facebook. So it's been there for ages. So I'm pretty sure that, you know, that takes the majority. But Facebook also, you know, they had a lot, like almost, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was more than 80% of their auditing of the contact and the false news were based in US only. So the outside of the world was like still vulnerable to this. And so I think what they're going to do now, they're going to do a more focus on these regions as well. And then once we move away, but you know, that's big tech, as we talked, you know, we can then move away to a little bit smaller, you know, technology companies. What they can do, like what's really great is that since 2014, so there was like several articles that came out, information about Ukrainian tech, right? So they have quite a lot of decacorns companies. So basically, you know, companies that reach 10 billion valuation that are based in Ukraine. There's a lot of developers. There's so much developers in Ukraine and in Russia. And I think that's also in short term going to hit really tech world because, you know, these developers, well, from Russian side, they're not going to be, I don't know, they're probably going to have difficulties to even pay these people. And then from Ukrainian side, they're all going to be involved in, you know, into the war. So for tech world, in the short term, I think until this whole situation is going to resolve, this is going to be a massive hit. So a lot of companies, because they're going to be forced to hire, you know, short of, like there's already short of talent, you know, as we know in this industry. So this is going to even escalate further. But then on top of that, as we talked, you know, in Ukraine has a very strong tech community, and it's been already kind of in this difficult situation since 2014. You know, they were kind of prepping, so morally, and I think mentally they're kind of there, and I think they're actually playing a big role in it. So you know, developers can unite, like this is what we're seeing, this is really unprecedented, because what's happening now is that, wars, we see that in an open aggression, the world can unite, and once they do that, they can cause havoc on somebody, on a bully. They can punish him by like not even getting directly involved into war, but causing even further pain. Like I think there was like a really good example of that. There was Google. People were leaving reviews for Google in Russia for Google Business. And this way spreading information, and that's unbelievable,
like reviews for restaurants, and putting the info against Putin and against the regime, and like in the reviews.
Yes, exactly. Okay. But then so that's one side of it, but I think there's so much more that they can actually do, because this is also raising, I think, the small tech and then coders and then kind of raising their competences in small time hacking, which and that's why, like, I think when the US and the rest of the countries also got involved in sanctioning businesses, that's why it's like we see this immediate impact in short term in stock markets and prices of the currency drop, and all this kind of companies, Russian companies, devaluing at a rate that's never been heard of, like all these massive amounts of money wiped out overnight almost, like and so this is just gonna get, and we're only in day 5. I think this is day 5 of the conflict, open conflict. So imagine if this would last a month or longer, what will then gonna happen? So I think this is also because there was such a short term, like obviously I think we're gonna see a lot more in small tech and tech generally getting involved in this conflict and actually trying to resolve it. And I guess as everybody else, we want peace. Like I think all the modern world wants just peace, isn't it?
So currently we do have 8 people who are still in the territory of Ukraine. So vast majority of them are support agents, so quite junior positions, but few of them, they have already graduated. They started as a support agents a few years ago, and they're still with Omnisend, and they graduated to more senior positions, so it's like knowledge expert, deliverability expert, very niche position, etc. So there are a lot of smart people who are still young. More or less those our colleagues are young people, but yeah, they start from working nights, late nights to support our customers globally, worldwide, and now we need to support them.